Hi, my name is Emily Iverson. Today I will be presenting domestic violence on the Yankton Sioux Reservation in South Dakota. Domestic violence is defined as violent or aggressive behavior within the home, typically involving violent abuse between the spouse or partner in the home. Risk factors for this include age, race, gender, and income. Ages on the Yankton Sioux Reservation mainly affected are between 18 and 50 years of age, but all ages can be affected by it. On the reservation, most percentage of the population is Native American, so a majority of the population that's involved in domestic abuse is Native American. Actually, 55% of sexual and domestic violence crimes are Native American race in South Dakota, not only here, but throughout the whole state. Um, Around 28% of women and 24% of men in South Dakota experience intimate partner violence, sexual violence, or stalking. Income has a huge part in domestic violence too, and on the reservation, on the Yankton Sioux Reservation, poverty is a huge factor in domestic violence. The Yankton Sioux Reservation, as of 2022, was 33.2% of residents were below the poverty level, and this is greater than 12.5% of this whole state of South Dakota. So we are a pretty poor area. Um, it leads to less jobs, increased stress, more stress on relationships and family homes. Uh, Women who have been victims of partner violence and whose partners have threatened or attempted suicide are a greater risk for those who have never been threatened by domestic violence or suicide. Um, Younger victims of domestic violence are more at risk for suicide than older victims. About 1 in 5 women who have experienced intimate partner violence have threatened or attempted suicide, which is a pretty high amount. The tribal codified laws are a prosecutor should forward copies of written reports to the tribally approved domestic shelter within 48 hours of the action taking place. Anyone arrested under this ordinance shall be held in a jail or holding until arraignment, so court. Prior to the release of the defendant, a community volunteer will discuss to the victim the availability of domestic violence groups for help that they may need. So they may get 30 to 60 days in jail. If alcohol or drug plays a part in the abuse, plays a part in the domestic violence abuse, a chemical dependency evaluation and complete cooperation with any recommendation for the treatment will be ordered. Um, the person committing the crime shall take part in a domestic violence program, so they must attend an intake session for evaluation and placement in the group of domestic violence, and must attend a minimum of 12 re-education sessions out of 14 consecutive ones. So they must attend 12 out of 14, or they may be taken back to court. South Dakota state law, so there's tribal ground here and there's South Dakota ground. It kind of gets mixed up, so it depends where the event took place. If it took place on tribal land, it'll be taken care of tribal authorities, but may be taken at a federal level depending on the amount of abuse and repetitive behaviors, or if it happens on state side, the BIA may be involved, but it will most likely be taken by the state side of things. So the state codified law is to not subject the victim under further domestic abuse, to evacuate the home of the victim. They will not be allowed to be around each other until everything is discussed, to not contact the victim other than through counsel, so through court arraignment. That will be the first time they're allowed to see each other. They will have orders to have no contact between the two. They need to engage in counseling between the event and court. To refrain from consumption of alcohol and drugs, some may be placed on PBTs or UAs to be proven that they are not taking part in any illegal activities, and to post bond is dependent on how severe the charges were and how high the charges, how far the court was. Um, Domestic violence in South Dakota has a lot of underfunding um, from the lack of police. They do not have high funding to take care of the victims the way they need to. It's oftentimes pushed to the side. Kristi Noem was actually banned from all federally recognized tribes in South Dakota because she was pushing for saying that the cartel was bringing in drugs to them and that the higher ups in the tribe were part of this. They were getting money from the cartel. Um, Tribes across the state have treaty agreements that require federal enforcement support, but the tribes have consistently reported that they're underfunded. Since Kristi Noem was banned, Attorney General Garland and State Senator Mike Rounds participated in the meetings with the tribes. Rounds sent a letter to the federal department urging a funding formula for the tribal law enforcement. He's also advocated for the federal government to open tribal law enforcement training center in South Dakota because I think the closest one that they go to is New Mexico. So we have not many tribal cops in this area. We only have a few because of how far the distance is to be trained. Victims of Crime Act's funding was cut, so there's no capacity to sustain or expand programs. They're having to cut back staffing, which leads to less resources, less help, less people to help these people in the situation that they are in. Awareness and prevention in 2023, 19 out of 30 programs participated in domestic violence counts report. So this does not show all of the participants. This shows only the 19. So this doesn't show the full amounts or percentages of who was affected by domestic violence and who the actual numbers of the entire state or reservations. This shows how the programs were used, who used them, like not specific names, but gender, age, children, adults, things like that. 256 victims were adult and children who were served by emergency shelters. There were 89 domestic violence hotline calls contacts received. So the calls taken in, these are people who want to be contacted to be helped. 263 people were trained from the public on prevention and early intervention to prevent domestic violence. 6 victims made requests for services because of lack of sufficient resources. So they live in an area of where they're not able to get the sufficient resources they need, so they're often contacting the state. There was no specific numbers of where or who these people were, but those are the numbers that were available. There's a domestic violence walk that takes place in the Yankton Sioux Reservation. It takes place every October, which is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. It's held in Lake Andes, and they walk from. There's a big group of people. Everybody has a candle that they hold that is purple, and it's to show their support to domestic violence awareness. And they walk from the park to the 4-H grounds where there's a meeting. There is a meal served for everyone. There's stories told. There's ways of how to prevent it, how to intervene, what you need to do if you are involved in it. Just different ways of how to prevent, intervene, and take a plan of action against it. Actually, some of the victims do come forward and tell their stories to kind of give others the courage to come forward to those who don't really want to talk about what happened. There's 2 women's shelters in Lake Andes. There's one on the east side of town and the west side of town. They have rooms for people to stay in if they need to. They're protected there. It's a locked facility. They have women who usually take care of them. Women and men can stay there. It's generally usually women that are there, though, because they're higher, more affected by domestic violence. They include therapies for mental health, substance abuse, and overall therapy in the area. We have a treatment center that they can also go to where they can get the right help. Housing's provided. There's 18 rooms in the main building. The other building is usually used for the therapy, the resources, and whatever they may need other than living or sleeping. They also provide food, transportation, and assistance with legal issues such as a lawyer and court issues and legal fees. So there is quite a bit of resources on the Yankton Sioux Reservation because Lake Andes is generally in a central location of the county, so we have the biggest Department of Domestic Violence resources in the area. What are ways you can reduce domestic violence in your area? Are there resources available to everyone to bring awareness, or is there a lack in your area?